how much do you think is due to Melania Trump? Now, she knows what it is to live under, dictatorial rule. She grew up under communism. She sent Vladimir Putin an emotional letter last Friday, the very day that Putin met her husband in Alaska, telling him to think of the children in this war, telling him he could end their suffering with just a stroke of the pen. And Ukraine's president on Monday at the White House passed on a letter to her, thanking her for thinking of the nearly 20,000 Ukrainian children that Putin has kidnapped. How influential do you think she has been in steering the president into gradually being tougher on Vladimir Putin?
It's such a great question you're asking, Andrew. I don't think people fully appreciate the power that Mrs. Trump has on President Trump's thinking. This didn't just come out of nowhere, right? It's one thing if it was a private letter. They made it very public for a reason. Mrs. Trump is moved by the killing of these children, the kidnapping of them. I mean, there's tens of thousands of them that have been taken from Ukraine into Russia. And it was made public for a reason. And I think that is to make sure that Putin understands that the one person who has more influence than anybody on Donald Trump, his wife, Melania, is very moved by this. And it's funny because the American media, you're the first person, Andrew, that has really picked up on the significance of this. And I know Mrs. Trump fairly well. I would just say that, no one should underestimate the power that she has on his decision making. And President Trump's display of that letter should speak volumes to what he was trying to convey to Vladimir Putin, which is, I want peace. I want the killing to end. He is so moved by the killing of children. And I saw this during my tenure in Syria when that was happening. And you've heard him talk about it in Gaza. And here we are again in Russia.
I think it was very clever of Zelensky to pick that up and
yeah, I will say that. That's the second piece of that, Andrew. That's the second piece. That Zelensky understood this meeting, the second meeting that Zelensky had. I know everybody got a kick out of the fact that he wore a suit, but Zelensky was picture perfect in this meeting. He understood. He said thank you a lot. And I know a lot of people mocked some of the imagery of it, the suit, the thank yous, but Zelensky got it. And the idea that he picked up on that Melania letter and said, here is my wife's letter to you, thanking your wife for doing this, was brilliant. And I just, again, sometimes people don't pick up on the imagery and the impact of some of these small things that happen in the meetings. And I'm glad that you've done that, Andrew, because it really did make a difference. And I know, I mean, I say this without actually having talked to the president, but I know that he walked back upstairs later that day and said to the First Lady, you're not going to believe what the First Lady of Ukraine, how she was moved by your letter. And so this is where sometimes the American media, in particular the international media, doesn't get it.
Sean, I want to pick up on something you just touched on there, the imagery. Well, the fawning of those 7 European leaders to Donald Trump, which was just amazing. And there's an equally amazing photograph from that meeting with these 7 European leaders on Monday that just shows not just the fawning, but Europe's weakness. The 7 of them sitting in front of Trump's desk, almost like errant school children or minions getting their orders. It shows that, well, I just wonder how sick Americans are really of having to bail out weak Europeans who can't even defend themselves and have to go crawling to the White House saying, please, 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 America, help us defend Ukraine.
So there's 2 things that I thought were interesting. One, how that picture differed from the first term. These guys all lectured him, told him how he was wrong, how he didn't understand the impact of his policies. So the contrast between term 1 and term 2 is unbelievable. And then last night I listened to NATO Secretary Mark Rutte go on television here in the United States and say Trump was right. The criticism that he was levying on NATO was correct. And his criticism of the fact that they wanted the protection of the United States, the Article 5 protections, but didn't want to match their commitment, which is part of the deal here, that they would have at that point 2% of their GDP towards their own national defenses. It was, to me, I loved it, because when I listened to the Secretary General make those comments last night, I thought to myself, for all of you elitists and foreign policy experts that have been decrying President Trump's stance on Europe and NATO, you finally got it. Here is the NATO Secretary General himself saying Trump was right in his criticism.
He was absolutely right. And may I just add, Sean, that his administration is equally right in its criticism of Australia. Our failure to lift our defence to anything, even remotely like an adequate amount to pretend to defend ourselves. We've been warned, and I think America might.
But Andrew, here's the thing: why is it? You look at the AUKUS deal with Australia. You look at what we do with NATO. Why is it always these folks want to lecture the United States about what they should do, what it should do here in the United States, not what you got? And again, I'm not trying to be critical of Australia or the EU or any of its member states, but the bottom line is, maybe you guys step up to the plate first, instead of criticizing the U.S. first. In Australia, you're closing up to China, and then you're criticizing the United States. It's like, hey, before you criticize the United States, when we're willing to give you submarines under AUKUS, stop cozying up to China.
Well, that is exactly the message coming from America. I endorse it 100%. And I think, the game's got to be over of the West, the rest of the West, treating America's army like a mercenary army that's actually at their disposal. It's not. You've got to have a partnership, a genuine one. Sean Spicer, thank you very much for your time.
Always appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you.